Do you know I once spent $50,000 buying one piece of equipment that I don't even use anymore? Yep, it was more expensive than my car and an actual total waste of money. Food photography can quickly become a very expensive habit, and you can rack up a whole lot of equipment, software, props that are totally unnecessary. So today I'm sharing 5 of my worst purchases that have cost me a ton of money and wasted time. And I'm hoping that by sharing these, you won't be repeating the same mistakes. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, the place for food photographers to learn how to elevate their images, take gorgeous food photos, and start making money and scaling their food photography business. Now, I've worked in the industry for over 13 years with commercial brands, restaurant brands, editorial magazines, cookbooks, food brands, and have seen my work both in print, online, and billboards. So I think I know a thing or two about what you do need and what you don't need in your camera bag and in your studio. So let's jump into 5 of the biggest waste of money and waste of time pieces of equipment or gear I've bought and never used. So I'm gonna start off with number 5, and I'm gonna save the most expensive and worst for last. Okay, coming in at number 5 would definitely be generic external hard drives. Focus on the word generic here. Whilst I definitely advise you to get an external hard drive, in fact, I'm gonna advise you to actually get 2 external hard drives so you have double copies of all your files. But what I did do when I was first starting off was getting cheap generic hard drives from the supermarket. And trust me, that was not a good idea. So one of my earlier shoots in my career, I had a member of staff who actually tripped over my tethering wire. So my whole camera, my tripod fell, my computer fell, and my hard drive, which was connected to it, also fell. Now, everything, including the camera, the lens, the tripod, even the Mac, survived. But what didn't survive was some of the contents of that hard drive. I lost a lot of files from previous shoots, and it took a lot of stress, a lot of tears, a lot of technical help that cost me a lot of money to recover those files back. So this is really one place where you don't want to scrimp and save, and you really want to buy an external hard drive that's tried and tested with good reviews. I personally like to use Lacy brand, which I've linked in the comments box below. And once we're on the subject of hard drives, you also want to make sure you get a fairly large one, because trust me, you don't want to have a million hard drives in your studio to look through to find specific files, even if you have the best filing system in the world. So life will be much easier if you just have a larger external drive. All right, number 4 on the list would be this camera bag by Ona. I'm going to start off with the positives about this bag. The material is beautiful leather and it wears just perfectly. It's really sleek, it's stylish, and it's actually survived quite a number of years. So it's actually a really well-made bag. But here's the main issue with this camera bag. It's actually only got one strap, so kind of one handle, and you're expected to sling it across your shoulder. But when you add in all the equipment that I have to carry to a shoot, so 2 camera bodies, 2 lenses, extra batteries, tethering equipment, the AirSync, a MacBook Pro, crocodile clips, the list goes on, but basically it's super heavy to carry on one shoulder. So when it comes to camera bags, I would definitely suggest putting fashion to the side and focusing on getting a bag that you can either wear as a backpack, so the weight is actually evenly distributed across your shoulders, or even better, get a trolley bag specifically for camera equipment that has its own compartments for different pieces of equipment. Now, I recommend the Pelican brand from the reviews I've read online, but I don't actually own one. Okay, so the next piece of equipment coming in at number 3 would be a spider calibration kit. Now, for those of you that might not be aware, most photographers will recommend that you calibrate your monitor every 3 months. Now, calibration basically means that the colors are adjusted to fit with a certain set of standards. And especially if you're having your work going into print, it's important that you have your screen calibrated so that what you see on your screen actually matches correctly to what comes out in print. Now, in reality, if you're using a current Mac, whether it's a MacBook Pro or an iMac, or even another brand of computers such as Microsoft, in my experience, having worked for large commercial brands like KFC and Pizza Hut, having had my images printed both on billboards, cookbooks, magazines, I have the opinion that current screens and monitors are very well calibrated. And usually the colors are very true to what the naked eye sees in the real world. And in fact, calibrating your monitor doesn't make such a huge difference when it comes to your final edited product. So for me and my experience, buying the Spider calibrator was a waste of money because when I initially even calibrated my screen to my naked eye, it looked very similar to what the original monitor calibration was. And having used that same laptop since 2015, yep, I make my equipment work for me, and not having recalibrated again, I have had no problems when it comes to the accuracy of my colors and my editing. So whilst this might not be the opinion of all photographers, if you have a new generation computer model, I don't think investing your money and time in calibration software is a must for photographers. So the next piece of equipment that I don't use very often, that costs me money, that now seems like a waste, is actually a Manfrotto studio stand. Now, this is basically a glorified version of a tripod. And the reason why I actually purchased a studio stand was because of mistake number one that's actually coming up. And you will understand why I needed a heavy-duty tripod when we get to that. But the reason why having a studio stand is so unnecessary as a food photographer is that the stand doesn't really do anything extra that a normal good quality tripod can. So there are plenty of tripods that have extension arms for doing vertical shots, or that go high up enough to do flat lays from a distance, as well as tripods that can actually carry the load of a standard DSLR plus lens, or even a mirrorless plus lens. In fact, a lot of the new mirrorless cameras are much lighter than the older DSLRs. So as a food photographer, there really isn't any reason why you should even be thinking about investing in a studio stand. And instead, what I would advise you to do is invest in a really good, sturdy tripod. My studio stand weighs over 100 kilos, and whilst it's sturdy, so is my tripod. And currently, I am not using the studio stand at all. It's just gathering dust. Okay, now on the top of my list, coming in at a whopping $50,000 of wasted money, will be my Phase 1 medium format camera. Yep, I made the mistake of investing in medium format. Now the price that I've just quoted you is actually the body as well as the lens. And here's the main reason why I bought it. At the time, I was doing a lot of editorial work and my images were being printed in magazines, and every month I wouldn't be happy with the quality of the print. I felt like what I was seeing on my screen didn't translate into print, even though my screen was calibrated. I felt like there was something missing in my images, especially when it came to the clarity or the sharpness of the image. And at that time, I thought, it must be my equipment that I'm using. Perhaps my camera body isn't as good as I thought it was. Or perhaps the lens I was using wasn't a good glass. After speaking to a few other food photographers who were also working for editorial magazines, I decided, based on the information I had, to invest in a Phase 1. And my thought process was that the quality of my images would improve. But to cut a very long and expensive story short, whilst the camera did give me a bit more megapixel, it really wasn't worth the headache or the money. First of all, I had to get certified as a Phase 1 specialist, which I did. But I also found, without fail, on every single shoot, something or the other would go wrong. Either the tethering wire would fail, sometimes the firmware would freeze up, and often there was absolutely no reason why the camera wouldn't work. It would just stop functioning. But most importantly, what I realized was there wasn't a huge improvement in my print quality. So even though I spent $50,000 to upgrade my equipment, the quality of my images stayed pretty much the same. Eventually, with more experience, I realized that it was actually my technique and my lighting that was the culprit behind the quality issues, not my equipment. So upgrading equipment and buying more expensive gear will not necessarily solve the core issues, which are likely due to technique. In fact, I'm now using the same camera that I was shooting all of those editorial magazines with, and like I said before, my work is appearing in print, on billboards, and I have no problems with clarity, with sharpness, because I now have a complete handle on my lighting and on my focusing techniques. So here's what I want you to learn from today's video. You don't need expensive equipment to work with large brands, to have your work printed on billboards, or to just have your work in print in general. B, expensive equipment doesn't necessarily mean better pictures. And case in point is me. And finally, C, technique, education, and experience will always win over spending more money on equipment. Okay, so over to you now. Have you made any expensive mistakes when it comes to your food photography? Jump into the comments and tell me all about your experience. And if you haven't made any stupid mistakes like me, give me a shocked face emoji, because the mistakes I've made are more than enough for all of us. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, then I'm sure that you're going to enjoy these two videos, so make sure you check them out because your fellow food photographers have been loving them. This one's all about how to nail dark food photography, and then this one is all about how to get more clients. You can also follow me along on Instagram. I'm there present every day pushing out tips, tricks, and tutorials on food photography. In the meantime, I'll catch you back right here next week with another video.